Last summer, I pulled over 200 pounds of food out of a single 30-foot strip along my back fence, and I never replanted a single seed, not one. Most gardeners I know spend every March buying seed packets, starting flats under grow lights, transplanting for weeks, fighting pests all summer long, and then doing it all over again the following year. I did exactly that for 25 years. What I'm going to walk you through today came from a completely different place. A few winters back, I got my hands on a translated inventory from an English monastery garden dated around 1320. It wasn't fancy. It was a simple list of what the monks grew, how they managed it, and what they ate through the winter. And as I read through it, I realized something that stopped me in my chair. Over half of the vegetables on that list do not exist in the produce section of any American grocery store today. They didn't vanish because they failed. They vanished because industrial agriculture couldn't profit from them. They were too productive, too perennial, too self-sustaining. You plant them once and you eat from them for years, sometimes decades. Today I'm going to share 20 medieval vegetables that fed European families through plagues, famines, and long hungry winters, and I'll show you how to grow them in your own backyard right now. Stay with me to the end because I'll share a medieval forcing technique for getting fresh greens in February that I have never once seen in any modern gardening book. Now, I want to be straight with you. When I first started reading about medieval gardening, I was skeptical. I figured if these plants were really that good, we'd still be eating them. I've been gardening since my late 20s. I've worked through the heirloom seed catalogs, the rare variety clubs, the homestead books. I figured anything worth growing I'd have already heard about, but what I came to understand as I started tracking these plants down one by one is that we don't grow them today because they failed. We don't grow them because they're inconvenient for big agriculture. They don't ship well. They don't all ripen at once. They don't fit in a plastic clamshell on a grocery shelf. Most of them are perennials or aggressive self-seeders, which means no seed company can sell you fresh seed every spring. That was the moment it all clicked. I had been told my whole life that modern vegetables are better. Turns out a lot of them are just easier to sell. Here's what medieval peasants and monks understood that we lost. A crop failure didn't mean a trip to the grocery store. It meant real hunger. So they designed their gardens around one principle, and that principle was resilience. They grew plants that returned on their own year after year. They grew plants that produced in the hungry gap that stretched from February to May when last year's stores are running out and this year's crops aren't ready yet. They grew plants that served 2 or 3 purposes at once, leaves and roots and seeds from the same plant. The medieval word for this kind of garden was the potager, or in the monasteries, the hortus. It wasn't decorative. It was survival infrastructure. And what I've come to appreciate, learning from my Amish neighbor Daniel and reading through these old manuscripts side by side, is that both traditions share the same root. It's not about fighting nature. It's about working with it. Let me show you the 20 plants that held European food security together for 1,000 years. We'll start with the perennial greens because these are the backbone of a medieval garden. Number 1, Good King Henry. This is a perennial spinach that was grown in every English cottage garden for 800 years. Plant it once in partial shade, keep it watered the first season, and it gives you tender shoots every spring, leaves all summer, and flower buds that cook up like broccoli. Space plants 18 inches apart. One plant feeds a small family for 20 years. Number 2, sea kale, the medieval ancestor of the cabbage family. You blanch the spring shoots under an overturned pot, and you get sweet, nutty stalks that taste like asparagus crossed with cabbage. Give each plant 3 feet of space. Once established in zones 4 through 8, they produce for 30 years or more. Number 3, French sorrel, tart lemon-flavored leaves that appear weeks before anything else in spring. Medieval cooks used it in green soups and fish sauces. Plant it in a cool, partly shaded corner. Cut it back hard in midsummer to refresh the leaves, and you have 2 harvests a year forever. Number 4, Alexander's, a celery parsley hybrid with black peppery seeds. Medieval monks called it the poor man's celery. It's a biennial that self-seeds, tolerates poor soil, and basically manages itself once you have a patch going. Number 5, Orish, also called mountain spinach, comes in green, red, and purple varieties. Self-seeds aggressively. You plant it one time and it returns stronger every year. It tolerates heat far better than regular spinach, which means it carries you through July and August without bolting. Now let's move to the roots because these were the calorie engines of the medieval garden. Number 6, skirret, a sweet white root that was the parsnip's more productive cousin before the Victorians abandoned it. Each plant gives you a cluster of 8 to 12 fingers fingers of sweet, tender root. Plant divisions 18 inches apart in fall. In zones 4 through 8, skirret is nearly bulletproof. Number 7, salsify, sometimes called the oyster plant. Long white roots with a delicate flavor that medieval cooks simmered in milk and butter. Sow seed directly in spring in deep loose soil. Harvest after the first hard frost has sweetened the roots. Any roots left in the ground will flower the second year and self-seed a new crop. Number 8, scorzonera, salsify's black-skinned sister. Richer flavor and higher yield. Same growing method. Both of these were replaced in modern gardens by the carrot, not because carrots taste better, but because carrots ship and store in plastic bags. Number 9, the true medieval parsnip. Not the sugar-loaded modern hybrids, but the old lean varieties like Hollow Crown. Plant them in deep, loose soil in April, harvest after 2 hard frosts concentrate the sugars, and they store in the ground all winter. In zones 5 and colder, mulch heavily with straw and dig roots as needed. Number 10, rampion, a wild bellflower with a sweet turnip-flavored root and edible leaves. This is actually the plant in the Rapunzel fairy tale, the one the mother was caught stealing. It's a biennial that self-seeds once you have a patch, and it thrives in the partial shade where nothing else wants to grow. Now, before we get into the heritage staples, I want to pause for just a second. Everything I'm sharing with you today fits inside a larger system that took me years to piece together. I laid the whole thing out in a resource called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. It's the same 5 defense layer system my Amish neighbor Daniel walked me through, including the 4-bed rotation plan and the morning walk routine that keeps pests off these medieval crops without a single chemical. If you want to build a garden that actually takes care of itself the way these old systems were designed to, scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below. It's all over at backyardbuildbooks.com. All right, let's keep going. Number 11, the broad bean, also called the fava bean. Before Columbus brought kidney beans from the New World, every European garden grew broad beans. They fix nitrogen in your soil while feeding you. Plant in late fall for overwintering in zone 7 and warmer, or as early as the ground can be worked in the north. Sow 4 inches apart in rows 18 inches apart. Number 12, colewort. This is the ancestor of kale, cabbage, and collards all rolled into one loose leaf plant. A cut-and-come-again brassica that medieval cooks ate year-round. Plant in spring, harvest the outer leaves every week, and it keeps producing through the first hard freezes in most zones. Number 13, leaf celery. Not modern stalk celery, but the thin-stemmed aromatic kind the Romans and medievals called smallage. You grow it for the leaves, not the stalks. Stronger flavor, far easier to grow than modern celery, and perennial in zones 6 and warmer. Number 14, Babington's leek, a true perennial leek from the coasts of Britain. It forms a cluster of bulblets every year, and you harvest a bulb or 2 per cluster indefinitely. Once established, you never replant. Plant 1 bulb now, and you have a lifetime supply of leeks within 4 years. Number 15, lovage, a 6-foot-tall celery-flavored perennial herb that stood in every medieval garden. 1 plant season, soups, stews, and stocks for 10 years or more. Cut it back to the ground in late fall, and it returns bigger every spring. Give it a permanent corner of the garden with rich soil. Now we come to the wild edibles that medieval families deliberately cultivated rather than foraging. Number 16, fat hen, also called lamb's quarters. Most American gardeners pull this up as a weed. Medieval families grew it on purpose because it outyields spinach 3 to 1 and handles summer heat without bolting. Let a few plants self-seed each year and you have an endless crop. Number 17, purslane, succulent, lemony, and loaded with omega-3 fatty acids. Medieval physicians prescribed it as medicine for everything from headaches to heart trouble. It grows anywhere the sun touches, self-seeds reliably, and tolerates the kind of drought that kills everything else in your garden. Number 18, garden nettles. Yes, stinging nettles grown on purpose. The cooked leaves are sweeter than spinach and richer in iron and calcium than almost any cultivated green. Medieval families ate them as a spring tonic after a long winter of salted meat. Plant them in a contained bed because they spread. Number 19, mâché, also called corn salad or lamb's lettuce. The cold, hardiest salad green I've ever grown. Sow in September in any zone, and you'll have fresh salad through the winter and into early spring. Once established, it self-seeds without fail. Number 20, the Welsh onion, a perennial bunching onion that divides itself every year. 1 clump planted today gives you a patch of 20 onions within 3 years. You harvest what you need and the rest keeps multiplying. I planted a single clump 5 years ago, and I haven't bought a green onion since. Let me share some patterns patterns I've noticed over 30 years in the garden. Things I got wrong that medieval families had already figured out. The first pattern is treating every single crop as an annual. Modern seed catalogs push us toward replanting everything every spring because that's how the seed business stays alive. Medieval gardens ran on perennials. Once you understand that most of your leafy greens, your alliums, and even some of your root crops can be perennials, the amount of work drops in half. The second pattern is planting in monoculture beds. A tidy row of one vegetable looks organized, but to a pest, it's a dinner invitation with a neon sign. Medieval gardens were interplanted chaos by modern standards. Lovage next to cabbage, next to sorrel, next to fava beans. That diversity confused pests and supported the soil. The third pattern is ignoring the hungry gap. Most American gardens produce a wall of food in July and August and absolutely nothing in March and April. Medieval gardens were deliberately designed to produce through those lean months with crops like sea kale, sorrel, mash, and overwintered leeks carrying families straight through spring. The fourth pattern is chasing productivity through inputs, fertilizers, sprays, amendments, more stuff. Medieval productivity came from the plants themselves being tougher, longer lived, and less demanding to begin with. Choose the right plants and you do less work, not more. Now here's the technique I promised you at the beginning. I came across this in the same monastery manuscript I mentioned earlier. Medieval gardeners had a way of producing fresh greens in February when nothing was growing outside and the ground was frozen solid. They called it forcing. Here's exactly how it works. In late fall, after the first hard frost, dig up a mature root of sea kale, chicory, or even dandelion. Trim off the leaves and stand the root upright in a deep bucket of damp sand in a dark cellar or an unheated garage. Keep the temperature between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Within 3 to 4 weeks, the root sends up pale, blanched shoots that are crisp, sweet, and completely tender. The medieval equivalent of fresh salad in the dead of winter. Cut the shoots when they reach 4 to 6 inches, and the root will produce a second and sometimes a third flush before it's spent. When spring comes, replant the root back in the garden, and it will recover and grow on. That one technique kept medieval families in fresh greens from November through March. I started doing it 3 winters ago with sea kale and chicory, and I will never go back to buying wilted grocery store salad again. If you want to take this further, I've put together a complete system that works with these medieval crops and any garden you're building around them. It's called the 30-day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. Inside, you'll find the 5 defense layer method for keeping pests out without chemicals, the 4-bed rotation plan that builds soil year after year, the morning walk routine that catches problems before they ever spread, and planting charts matched to your climate zone. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below. It's over at backyardbuildbooks.com. And if this video gave you something new to try, drop a comment and tell me which of these 20 crops you want to plant first. I read every one of them. I'll leave you with this. Those monks and peasants weren't growing these plants because they were romantic about tradition. They were growing them because they work. And 700 years later, they still do. Thanks for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next one.